A billionaire's $2 billion reactor fails every 90 seconds. He mocks a cleaning lady, then her 10-year-old daughter steps forward and claims she can fix it. What happens next shocks the entire lab. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories reach. At 12:47 a.m., inside the reactor lab on East Riverside Drive in Austin, the Titan reactor shut itself down for the 37th time. The hum died mid-breath. The massive cylindrical core dimmed from electric blue to dead gray. On the overhead monitor, the countdown timer froze at 90.00 seconds. Again. Julian Marsh didn't move. 24 engineers stood in a half-circle around the control bay, their shoulders stiff, eyes flicking between the dark reactor and the man who had built it. No one dared speak first. Finally, Dr. Ravi Menon cleared his throat. "We're seeing the same harmonic dampening cascade. The resonance spike builds at 88 seconds and—" "I know what it does," Julian said. His voice wasn't loud. That made it worse. 6 weeks, $20 million in overtime, 43 emergency patches, the brightest engineers in the country flown in and housed in luxury condos, and the Titan reactor, his life's work, his legacy, the machine that was supposed to power half the Southwest cleanly for a century, died every time like it had a built-in expiration date. 90 seconds. Julian stepped down from the raised control platform and walked slowly toward the core chamber. His reflection shimmered faintly in the reinforced glass. "You promised me stable output," he said, not turning around. "You promised me this would hold." Ravi swallowed. "The math holds." Julian's jaw tightened. "The math doesn't matter if the machine refuses to live." A nervous shift rippled through the room. On the far side of the lab, near a row of storage cabinets, a woman in a gray cleaning uniform stood perfectly still beside a mop bucket. Sarah Chen had learned to read rooms the way other people read weather forecasts. This one was about to storm. Julian turned abruptly. "Run diagnostics again." "We already—" Again. Keys clacked, screens filled with scrolling data, spectral graphs, thermal maps, all pristine, all useless. Julian exhaled sharply through his nose. 3 days. The Department of Energy makes its Horizon Initiative decision in 3 days. If Titan doesn't demonstrate sustained stability, we lose the contract. No one needed to ask what that meant. The Horizon contract wasn't just prestige, it was billions. It was dominance in the clean energy market. It was Julian Marsh's name etched into history. Instead, he had a $2 billion paperweight. He laughed suddenly, a sharp sound. "You know what this feels like? Like building a heart that refuses to beat." Silence. He paced once across the polished concrete. His gaze drifted and stopped. Sarah lowered her eyes. "You," Julian said. The engineers shifted uncomfortably. She looked up slowly. "Yes, sir?" "How long have you been cleaning this lab?" 3 months. "And in 3 months," he continued, "you've watched my team fail every single night." I just clean, sir." He took a few steps toward her. His shoes echoed in the cavernous room. "That's the point," he said lightly. "You just clean. No PhDs, no grants, no Nobel Prize ambitions." The engineers avoided eye contact. Julian turned back toward them. "Maybe that's what we need. Someone who doesn't know enough to be wrong." A few uncomfortable laughs surfaced. Sarah gripped the mop handle tighter. "Sir, I don't understand." He faced her fully now. "Fix it." The room went still. She blinked. "What?" "Fix the reactor." A couple of engineers actually chuckled. One muttered, "Unbelievable." Julian's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You fix it, I'll give you $100 million. The laughter grew louder. Sarah's face flushed deep red. "Please don't. And if you fail," Julian continued smoothly, "you're fired. Not just from here, from every contractor in this corridor. I'll make sure no lab in Austin hires you again." The laughter stopped. Sarah's throat worked as she tried to speak. "Sir, I have a daughter." "That's unfortunate." The words landed like a slap. Ravi stepped forward. "Julian, this isn't—" Stay out of it. He kept his eyes on Sarah. So, want to try your luck? Her voice trembled. I can't. That's what I thought. Mommy can't, a small voice said from the doorway, but I can. Every head turned at once. A girl stood just inside the lab entrance, backpack slipping off one shoulder. She looked tiny against the industrial steel and glass around her, but she wasn't hiding. She was staring straight at Julian. Sarah's face drained of color. Lily, what are you doing here? You said you'd be done by midnight, the girl replied calmly. It's almost 1. Julian stared at her for a long moment, then let out a slow breath that might have been amusement. And who are you? He asked. She stepped forward. I'm Lily. He glanced at Sarah. You bring your child to work now? I didn't mean to, Sarah said quickly. The sitter canceled and Does she know how to fix nuclear reactors? The engineers laughed again, cautiously. Lily looked past him at the dark core chamber. That's the one that keeps stopping at 90 seconds, right? The laughter faded. Julian tilted his head. You've been listening. She nodded. He crouched slightly so they were eye level. And you think you can do what this entire room can't? Yes. No hesitation. Something flickered across his face. Not belief, not yet. Something closer to curiosity. You understand the terms? He said. $100 million if you succeed. You and your mother both out if you fail. Sarah grabbed her daughter's shoulder. Stop this, please. But Lily didn't look away from Julian. Turn it on, she said. At the edge of the group, a composed woman in a navy blazer stepped forward. Dr. Patricia Hayes had been observing quietly all evening, hands folded, expression unreadable. If this continues, it will be documented. I'm here on behalf of the Department of Energy. I won't have theatrics contaminating federal review. Julian stood up slowly. Fine, documented. Sarah's voice broke. Lily, you don't have to. The girl squeezed her hand. It's okay. Julian gestured toward the control station. You get 10 seconds, that's it. Ravi hesitated. Julian, do it. The reactor powered up again. A low mechanical hum filled the lab, building like a distant storm. Light pulsed faintly inside the chamber. Lily walked forward slow and steady until she stood just a few feet from the containment glass. 8 seconds. She closed her eyes. 9. 10. Julian cut the power. The hum collapsed into silence. Well? He asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she moved closer to the reactor housing, pressing her small palm lightly against the metal casing, as if checking someone's temperature. The engineers exchanged looks that hovered between disbelief and discomfort. What exactly are you doing? One of them asked. Listening, she said softly. Julian crossed his arms. With what exactly? With my ears. A faint smirk touched his mouth. She leaned her head gently against the steel and closed her eyes again. For the first time all night, the room didn't laugh. It just watched. And somewhere deep inside the cold, silent nuclear reactor chamber, something waited. The lab stayed silent. Lily kept her head against the metal casing for several seconds, as if the reactor might whisper again even while powered down. Julian checked his watch. You heard something in 10 seconds? She stepped back. Yes. Ravi let out a slow breath. That's not how this works. Lily looked at him politely. It hums steady at first. Then there's a tiny shake under it, like when a glass vibrates before it cracks. The engineers exchanged skeptical looks. Julian's voice was cool. Our acoustic arrays monitor vibration at the molecular level. They're ignoring it, Lily replied. A few of the engineers actually rolled their eyes. Dr. Patricia Hayes stepped toward the main console. Pull acoustic feed channels 5 through 9 from that last run. Keys clicked. Colored waveforms filled the screen. Zoom at 8 to 10 seconds, she added. The graph magnified. At first, nothing unusual, just clean resonance curves. Then, near the lower band, a faint, irregular spike. Ravi frowned. That's background noise. Enhance it, Dr. Hayes said. The spike sharpened. The room grew very still. Julian stepped closer to the monitor. What am I looking at? A high-frequency anomaly, Dr. Hayes answered evenly. It's small, but it's there. Lily pointed toward the reactor housing. It's not software. Julian glanced down at her. Then what? It's hurt. The word hung awkwardly in the air. Ravi shook his head. It's titanium alloy rated beyond stress tolerance. Lily walked slowly along the curved casing, dragging her fingers lightly over the bolts spaced evenly around the core flange. She stopped at one near the lower right quadrant. "This one," she said. The engineers stared at her. "That bolt is torqued to specification," Ravi snapped. "It's too tight," Lily replied quietly. Julian studied her face. There was no performance in it, no fear either. "How do you know?" he asked. She looked up at him. "Because it doesn't sound like the others." A long pause. Julian straightened. "Get the fiber optic camera." Ravi hesitated. "You're seriously?" "Do it." Minutes later, a slim inspection camera was inserted carefully into the bolt housing. Everyone crowded around the monitor. The screen flickered with dark metal textures. "Rotate left," Julian said. The camera adjusted. Then someone inhaled sharply. There it was. A hairline fracture beneath the bolt head. Thin, almost invisible, but real. Ravi leaned closer. That's impossible." Dr. Hayes folded her arms. "Not impossible, just overlooked." The lab felt different now. Julian looked at Lily, his expression no longer amused. "Explain it," he said quietly. She shrugged lightly. "Great-great-great-grandpa William said metal remembers when you hurt it. If you squeeze it too hard, it waits. Then it breaks when you need it most." Silence settled over the engineers. For the first time in 6 weeks, the Titan reactor didn't look invincible. It looked fragile. And for the first time that night, Julian Marsh wasn't smiling. The crack was barely visible on the screen, but no one could unsee it now. Ravi straightened slowly. "Even if that fracture expands under resonance, it shouldn't shut down the entire system." "It's not just the crack," Lily said. All eyes turned to her again. She stepped closer to the console, standing on her toes to see the display. "When it hums, the shake travels. It hits that bolt and bounces back wrong." "Bounces back wrong?" one engineer muttered. Dr. Hayes didn't dismiss it. "Resonant feedback loop?" Lily nodded. "Like when you pluck a guitar string and it buzzes against something loose." Julian's gaze sharpened. "You're saying the fracture is creating a secondary vibration?" "Yes." Ravi shook his head. "The alloy is reinforced aerospace-grade titanium composite. It doesn't flex like that." "It's too strong," Lily said softly. "It doesn't bend, so the shake has nowhere to go." The words landed heavier than they should have. Julian looked back at the image of the crack. "So what happens at 90 seconds? "It gets tired," Lily answered. "The metal heats. The crack opens just enough. The vibration gets louder. The system thinks something catastrophic is happening, so it shuts itself down." Silence. Dr. Hayes glanced at the live data logs. "The spike does intensify just before cutoff." Ravi rubbed his forehead. "We replaced software, recalibrated dampeners, adjusted cooling flow. We never listened to the bolt," Julian finished quietly. He turned to Lily. "If the metal can't bend, what does it need?" She looked at the crack again, thoughtful but calm. "Something softer," she said. The engineers exchanged wary looks. Julian folded his arms. "Define softer." "A sleeve," Lily replied, "inside the bolt hole. Something that can squish a little, so when the shake comes, it doesn't fight it, it cushions it." Ravi stared at her. "You want to weaken the housing?" "No," she said gently. "I want to stop it from hurting itself." The room fell quiet again. Julian studied the reactor through the glass. 6 weeks of failure, $20 million, his reputation hanging by a thread. He looked back at the tiny fracture on the screen. "Material?" he asked. Lily answered without hesitation. "Copper." A few engineers actually laughed under their breath. "Copper won't survive the thermal load," Ravi argued. "It doesn't have to carry the load. It just has to absorb the shake." Dr. Hayes looked at Julian. "It's unconventional, but mechanically not impossible." Julian's jaw tightened as he made the calculation. Then he nodded once. "Machine the sleeve, now." For the first time that night, the engineers didn't argue. They moved. By 3:18 a.m., the copper sleeve was ready. It looked almost insignificant sitting on the stainless steel tray, a thin ring of soft metal beside the new bolt. Nothing about it suggested it could save a $2 billion machine. Ravi held it up skeptically. "If this melts, we're back to zero." Lily stood beside her mother, watching calmly. "It won't melt." Julian didn't look at anyone. "Install it." The lab moved with sharp efficiency now. The damaged bolt was removed, the tiny fracture cleaned and inspected again. The copper sleeve was pressed carefully into the housing, lining the interior like a bandage. A fresh bolt followed, tightened, but not forced. Torque set 5% lower, Ravi muttered. Julian glanced at Lily. Happy? She shook her head slightly. Not yet. Everyone stepped back as the casing was sealed. The lab felt different now. No laughter, no arrogance, just tension thick enough to taste. Powering up, Ravi announced. The reactor hummed to life. 30 seconds passed. The vibration monitors flickered. 60 seconds. Julian's hands were clasped tightly behind his back. 80 seconds. 85. No spike. 90. The timer crossed the line. No shutdown. No darkness. 91. 92. The hum smoothed out. Deeper now. Steady. Almost peaceful. 2 minutes. 3. Dr. Hayes stared at the monitors. Resonance stabilized. 5 minutes. No failure. The room exploded. Someone shouted. Another engineer laughed in disbelief. Ravi sank into a chair, staring at the screen like it might vanish if he blinked. Sarah covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. Lily didn't celebrate. She just listened. Julian stood frozen, eyes locked on the reactor. The machine he had nearly destroyed with pride was alive, because a 10-year-old had told him to be softer. After 7 full minutes of continuous operation, he finally spoke. Shut it down. The hum faded slowly this time, not like a death, more like a satisfied breath. Julian turned toward Lily. For the first time since she walked in, there was no mockery in his face, only humility. You did it, he said quietly, and for the first time in 6 weeks, the Titan reactor had a heartbeat that didn't stop. No one left the lab. Even after the reactor powered down smoothly, the engineers stayed frozen around the consoles like witnesses to something impossible. Julian walked slowly toward Lily. $100 million, he said, his voice steady but lower than before. I don't break contracts. Sarah immediately shook her head. Sir, she was just... He raised a hand gently, not to silence her, to stop her from apologizing. The agreement stands. The engineers stared at him. Dr. Hayes stepped forward. For the record, the Titan reactor has achieved sustained stability beyond 90 seconds under modified housing conditions. The correction originated from, she glanced at Lily, non-traditional mechanical observation. Julian gave a faint breath that might have been a laugh. That's one way to put it. Sarah's legs gave out and she sat down hard in the nearest chair. Tears streamed down her face, but she wasn't trying to hide them anymore. I was going to stop treatment next month, she whispered. The words cut through the noise. Julian turned to her slowly. Why? My insurance only covered part of it. I can't miss more shifts, and I can't leave her alone. Lily reached for her hand. The lab, loud seconds ago, was silent again. Julian nodded once, decision already made. Effective immediately, you're on the executive health plan, full coverage, retroactive, all outstanding medical debt cleared. Sarah stared at him as if she hadn't heard correctly. You don't have to. I do. The firmness in his voice wasn't anger this time, it was something else. He looked back at Lily. You said your great-grandfather taught you to listen to machines. Yes. What was his name? William McCormick. He fixed planes in World War II. Julian went very still. My grandfather flew B-17 bombers over Belgium. His aircraft caught fire over Belgium. An engine stalled mid-air. Lily listened carefully. The crew chief climbed onto the wing while it was burning, restarted the engine, saved the entire crew. Sarah's breath caught. Julian swallowed. His name was Sergeant William McCormick. The weight of it settled slowly. The man who saved Julian's grandfather taught Lily how to listen to metal. Julian looked at the reactor, then back at the child standing in front of him. The 100 million, he said softly, suddenly feels like interest on a very old debt. For the first time that night, Lily smiled, and Julian Marsh, billionaire engineer, stood in his own lab feeling smaller and strangely lighter than he had in years. 6 months later, late afternoon at Marsh Industries, the Titan reactor ran like it had never known failure. The lab no longer felt like a war zone. Engineers moved with confidence instead of fear. The hum in the background was steady, almost comforting. Sarah Chen walked through the glass doors wearing a navy blazer instead of a gray cleaning uniform. "Quarterly projections are up 12%, she said, placing a folder on the conference table. "The Adaptive Materials Division is ahead of schedule." Julian leaned back in his chair, watching her. Lead technical consultant. The title still felt surreal to her. To him, it felt earned. "You reorganized my entire testing pipeline in 3 months, he said quietly. "You let me," she replied. A small pause. Across the hall, Lily sat cross-legged on a lab table while 2 senior engineers listened carefully. "Close your eyes. Don't stare at the screen. Just listen." Julian glanced through the glass, a faint smile touching his face. "She terrifies my staff," he said. Sarah's lips curved slightly. "Good." He studied her for a moment longer than necessary. "Your latest scans?" She met his eyes. "Clear." The words settled between them like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. He nodded once, relief flickering openly this time. "Good." Silence stretched, not awkward, but charged. "You've changed," she said softly.
He didn't deflect it. That night forced it. "You humiliated me," she reminded him. "I know. And you could have ignored the debt." "I know that too." Another pause. He stood and walked toward the glass wall overlooking the reactor floor. "My grandfather never talked about being saved," he said. "He carried it quietly, like a weight." Sarah stepped closer, but not too close. "You don't have to carry everything alone," she said. He let out a faint breath. "I'm not very good at not being in control." I noticed. A hint of warmth slipped into her voice. He turned to face her fully now. Not as CEO, not as the man who once threatened her job. As someone who was wrong, he said, and doesn't want to be that man again. The air shifted. Across the hall, Lily's laughter echoed briefly as the reactor hummed in perfect rhythm. Julian looked back at Sarah. "Dinner," he said quietly. "Not business, not charity, just dinner." She held his gaze for a long second. "Okay," she answered. Outside, the Austin skyline glowed in the early evening light. Inside, the Titan reactor kept running. Steady, softened where it once was brittle. And for the first time, Julian didn't feel like he was waiting for everything to shut down at 90 seconds. Dinner was at 8:15 p.m. on South Congress, at a quiet restaurant far enough from downtown that no one from the lab would wander in by accident. Julian arrived first, not because he wanted to control the room out of habit, but because he was nervous, and he didn't like being nervous. Sarah walked in exactly on time. No blazer tonight, no lab badge clipped at her waist, just a simple dress and her hair pulled back loosely. She looked like someone who had survived something and decided not to let it define her. He stood when she reached the table. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I want to." They sat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she smiled faintly. "You've negotiated billion-dollar contracts, but you're uncomfortable at dinner?" "Billion-dollar contracts don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like they know I was cruel." She didn't rush to contradict him. "You were," she said calmly. "That night." He nodded. "I know." The waiter approached. They ordered without really thinking about it. When they were alone again, Sarah leaned back slightly. "Why did you explode like that?" He hesitated. "Because I was terrified. Titan was supposed to be the one thing I couldn't fail at. I built it after my mother died. After my father lost half the company. It was proof." "Proof of what?" "That I could hold everything together." She watched him carefully. "And when it failed," he continued, "I needed someone to blame. You were there." The honesty sat heavy between them. "I almost lost treatment because of that moment," she said quietly. "I know. And I hated you. I know that too." A small silence. But you kept your word. Most men with your power wouldn't have. He met her eyes. That wasn't generosity. That was obligation. Maybe, she said. But what you did after wasn't. He frowned slightly. You didn't just pay the money. She continued. You showed up at the hospital. You sat through chemo appointments. You brought Lily math puzzles because you said she was bored. His expression softened. She corrected my long division. She corrects everyone. They both laughed quietly. Then Sarah's face grew more serious. There's something you don't know. Julian's posture shifted immediately. What? The reason I took the cleaning job here. He waited. My oncologist told me I had maybe 2 years if treatment didn't respond. I wanted Lily somewhere stable, somewhere powerful, somewhere with people who build things that last. He absorbed that slowly. You weren't just mopping floors. No, you were planning for her life without you. She nodded once.
The thought hit him harder than he expected. She won't need to plan like that anymore, he said firmly. She shouldn't have had to in the first place. Another quiet pause. Outside, traffic moved slowly down South Congress. Inside, the world felt smaller. You scare me, Julian said suddenly. She blinked. Why? Because you see through me. And I don't know how to hide from you. You don't have to. The words were simple, direct. He leaned forward slightly. If we do this, if this becomes something, I don't want it to be gratitude. It isn't, she said. Or guilt. It isn't that either. Then what is it? She held his gaze steadily. It's the man who stood in that lab after Titan started running and looked like he'd just learned how to breathe. He didn't look away. And it's the man who listens now, she added softly. Back at Marsh Industries, the Titan reactor continued its smooth, steady hum. No spike at 90 seconds, no fracture spreading under pressure. Just strength, softened where it needed to be. And for the first time in his life, Julian wasn't trying to overpower something fragile. He was choosing to protect it. Weeks turned into months. The lab was no longer a place of fear. Engineers consulted Lily before every test run. Sarah walked confidently through corridors that once intimidated her, issuing instructions that moved the company forward. Julian watched from his office, learning how to lead without intimidation, how to ask questions without ordering, how to pause and actually listen. One late afternoon, Lily ran into his office, notebook in hand. You said you need help calibrating the resonance dampeners, she said, grinning. Julian laughed quietly. He means me and you. Sarah appeared in the doorway. You two plotting trouble? She asked, though she smiled. Julian shook his head. Just learning patience. Sarah stepped closer, lowering her voice. And humility? Mostly that, he admitted. They looked at each other across the office, the air heavy but gentle. No words were rushed, no ego insisted, just acknowledgement, quiet and real. Outside, the Titan reactor hummed steadily in the background. Its vibrations no longer threatened collapse. They resonated with confidence, with life, with the echo of a child who listened. Julian took a deep breath. We've come full circle, he said softly. Sarah smiled. Some debts last generations, but some people, they finally get it right. He nodded. Some hearts do too. Lily ran past, waving a wrench triumphantly. Julian watched her, then Sarah, and finally the reactor. For the first time, the past, the pain, the failures, they all felt settled, not forgotten, but honored. And Julian Marsh, billionaire and once hardened man, finally allowed himself to believe that strength could come from softness, that listening could be as powerful as building, and that love, quiet, patient, steady, was the most revolutionary force of all. The circle was complete. The hum continued, and they all moved forward. And that's how a 10-year-old's courage and wisdom changed the course of a billionaire's life forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Soul Strength Stories for more life-changing tales.